Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Romine, and this is the Houston Grass Podcast. Here we are at the end of April, last couple of days of April, and we have had a busy spring so far. We're two-thirds of the way in, I guess. We've had a little rain. And I don't know if you would consider it a seasonal amount or if it's kind of an average or below average. I know there were some pretty good cracks in the ground around our office that have that have since closed in with the couple of rains that we've had, so that's good. I know the grass that we are getting from the farm looks out of this world good. It is thick and green as it's ever been, and so I know the regular rains have been doing some good for them. So anyway, we haven't gotten the crazy hot yet, but we all know it's just around the corner. So today we want to talk about those things that are coming up that are going to be due to take care of in May. We still have another month as far as best time of the year to plant grass. We've got another month for sure in front of us here. You get the moderate temperatures. It's just so much easier on the grass and plants or anything that you're going to plant to do it in the springtime as opposed to summer. So if you've got a project in mind, go ahead and jump out there and take care of those. It's going to be time for Super Turf here in May, the Super Turf Fertilizer to put out on everything. The critical timing thing is going to be the pre-emergent. The Barricade Pre-emergent is going to need to be put out here in the next couple of weeks before summer really kicks off. So we'll talk through some of those things, and the big topic I guess we're going to talk about here, other than just the maintenance things that we talk about, I'm going to talk a fair amount about the sunlight test and picking grass varieties based on how much sunlight you get in your yard. So we have that conversation dozens of times per week. When somebody calls, and if it's not a new build and they're saying I need grass, especially if I know what part of town they're in and how established the neighborhood is, the first question or two is going to be how much shade do you have. A lot of people are aware of the issues that excessive shade can cause, but a lot of them are not. So we talk through that a lot. I want to touch on some of those things here. So let's jump into that that sunlight issue here. There are shade-loving plants out there, but if we're just talking about grass in our part of the world, the Gulf Coast here, the minimum amount of sunlight that any grass that I am aware of need is 4 to 5 hours of direct sunlight per day. That doesn't mean a little spot here, a little spot there. It means morning or evening sun, getting that sunlight underneath that canopy, or when it's directly overhead, it has to get that 4 to 5 hours of direct sunlight. Now that 4 to 5 hours of sunlight, that is only for our most shade tolerant varieties, like as St. Augustine's go, the Cobalt and the Palmetto St. Augustine. Palmetto's been around a long time. It's been our solution to shade issues for a lot of years. We feel like Cobalt is coming along. We are expanding our acres of it. By the way, they all look almost identical. What Cobalt brings to the table is first it brings some drought tolerance that some of the others don't have. And of course it's got the shade tolerance, but it's got also a fair amount of disease tolerance. You know, brown patch and gray leaf spot and things like that can be an issue in the St. Augustines, and Cobalt does a decent job of resisting a lot of that. So the other ones that are shade tolerant are the fine-bladed zoysias, the Cavalier and Emerald zoysia. And so all of those grasses, the Cavalier and Emerald zoysia, the Cobalt, the Palmetto, can survive as long as they get 4 to 5 hours of direct sunlight. The rest of these grasses that we carry, such as the regular St. Augustine, the Raleigh St. Augustine, the Palisade zoysia, those are more like 6 or 7 hours of direct sunlight needed to thrive. And the more sunlight that any of these grasses get, the better they are going to do. And then that leaves the Bermuda grasses, both the Tifway 419 and the TexTurf 10. They need 100% sunlight. They do well on sports fields, out in the middle of golf fairways, but they have to have 100% sunlight. You plant it up next to a fence, a house, or under a tree, its time is limited. And so we have to have that conversation a lot with people. A lot of these neighborhoods have gone to Bermuda grass for their front yards mainly because of their drought tolerance, or at least that's what I suspect. They do bring a lot of drought tolerance to the table. That's the only thing I can think of, because They are higher maintenance because they are not quite as dense. They get the weedy grasses, the weeds in them a little easier, and they just have no shade tolerance. And there are not many houses that are built now that don't have at least a fence or a tree or something like that that's going to create some shade, that's going to create a problem for the Bermuda grass. So how to check for these things? A lot of people ask, can they send some pictures and we look at it? And the answer is no. It does take a full day of observation to kind of figure out how much sunlight that you get. The easiest thing is if you have a security camera of some sort that looks out at the area, and then at the end of the day you can kind of scroll through that quickly and see what it looks like. And what you're going to probably find out is that this spot over here may get plenty of sunlight, and then there's a spot here, and what you're probably going to see is that it's not going to tell you anything you don't already know, because the grass is probably already thinning out, or maybe bare dirt in those less sunny areas. And it's just the way that it works here. A friend of mine, I was over at their house the other day, and I took some pictures and a little video as I was going in, because I was like, oh, this is a perfect example of the trees, 2 oak trees, actually probably 4 oak trees, 2 in the yard and 2 out by the curb, and they were fairly pruned up but definitely needed some more, and the grass was just thinning out underneath them. It's probably being mowed a little bit too short as well. So like I said, we're talking about picking the right grass varieties. A lot of people have an idea of the grass that they want to use, but if your sunlight conditions are not conducive to that variety of grass, you've got to shift. And because it's expensive. I mean, taking grass out and replacing grass is an expensive proposition. If you're just buying grass as one thing, then it's not inexpensive either. But when you have to go in and take some old grass out and bring in the topsoil and all the things that go along with that, it adds up. So picking the right grass up front is very important. If you've got any questions about any of this, please give us a call. Like I said, I did want to touch on sunlight because that's probably the thing that we talk about most here. Unless you just call us and tell us, this is the grass that I want and this is what I'm doing, send me 3 pallets of it, we're going to ask you, and we are going to try hard to talk you out of putting the wrong grass in a yard, because we don't want the call back a year later and wondering what happened and why the grass disappeared. So we try to educate as best we can, especially when it comes to sunlight. But we are selling the Palmetto by the piece. Normally it's just the Raleigh St. Augustine is the only grass that we sell by the piece, but during the spring we try to keep some Palmetto here because we realize there's a lot of people that need to patch in here and there because of too much shade in the front yard or wherever. It does, by the way, mix in very well. So let's say that you do find some of those spots, you do use your camera, you go outside and take pictures every hour. I think I mentioned earlier using the security camera, but you can also go out and take a picture every hour on a sunny day and scroll through those and see where your weak spots are. You probably are you're going to know where the weak spots are because you're probably already missing a little bit of grass there anyway. Let's say you do have some of those weak spots. We do try to keep Palmetto, and you don't need a whole pallet. Say you don't need 450 square feet worth of weak spots. We do in the springtime, March, April, and May, try to keep pallets of Palmetto here that we can sell by the piece. We do that, and as long as people are looking for it. Once that demand kind of slows down, we quit doing it. But the fact that we are in May, we will probably be doing it throughout the month. So if you've got some bare spots in your yard that are lacking in sunlight a little bit, now is definitely the time to come get some Palmetto pieces. Get them out there, water them in like you would if you were redoing your whole yard or whatever. But do take advantage of this probably last month of the year until next spring that we're going to sell those Palmetto pieces and patch those weak spots up there. They look very similar, the Raleigh St. Augustine and the Palmetto St. Augustine. You can lay them side by side, and over time they're going to look very similar. I'm not sure I could pick out the difference if somebody told me the 2 grasses were in the yard. So we will continue to do that as long as there is demand for it. When the demand starts to back off, what we don't want to do is break a pallet apart and not be able to sell the rest of it, and end up having to throw it away because it sat here for too long. So as long as people are looking for pieces of it, we'll keep it here, and I suspect that will be the case through May anyway. So next thing I want to move on to here is May watering protocol. We are going to start heating up here. So things do start to change. Of course, when June, July, August get here, it's almost impossible to overwater. It is when it gets real hot. It's a pretty good battle, which is the reason that we tell everybody March, April, and May are definitely the best months to plant grass. So first I'll talk about planting grass in May. If you're going to plant grass in May, we are going to have enough of those 85 to 90 degree days that critical time is always the most critical time is that first day that you lay the grass down. People generally underestimate. We tell everybody you need to put 2 inches of water down. Unless you go stick a rain gauge out there, you're really not going to know what it takes to do that. So they ask us, well, how long should I water? And we're kind of guessing for sure because we don't know what your water pressure is and what kind of sprinkler you're using. I can tell you that in my experience, when I use the wand style sprinkler, the one that kind of oscillates back and forth like this, at my house, it took about 8 hours to put out 2 inches of water over an area with that type of sprinkler. And I don't mean 8 hours total, 4 hours here and then move the sprinkler. I mean in one spot. And when you put out 2 inches of water in an area, you are going to know that you have done it. You should walk out there and you should kind of feel the ground squish and give way under your feet as you step out there. As a matter of fact, you should step out there and, ooh, I shouldn't step there, and step back because you're kind of leaving footprints. So that is what you're going for that first day. And then we're probably getting into watering daily as opposed to the real moderate temperature times of year. You might get away with every other day after that first day, but we're definitely getting into you need a half inch to an inch of water a day. I would probably say closer to an inch that first week, and maybe that second week you could back off to a half inch. So obviously I mentioned how long it takes with a sprinkler earlier. With an irrigation system, those times are cut down dramatically. You should have your irrigation system set up to do 2 half-inch waterings per week on an established lawn. With new grass, you're going to have to at least double that. So instead of a half inch, you're trying to put out 2 inches of water. You may be talking about running each zone for a couple of hours in some places for sure. Again, the only way to really check that and know what you're getting into is with rain gauges. I'm sure Amazon's got some cheap rain gauges you can buy, and it would be best to randomly stick 3 or 4 out and move them around so you know what your irrigation system or your hose is capable of putting out and having an idea what your coverage is. So I can't jump up and down about that enough. As far as it's times to run irrigation, for established grass, like I mentioned earlier, with an irrigation system, you're looking for 2 1/2 inch waterings per week. If it gets real hot and real dry in July and August, you might have to bump that to 3. For the most part, most of the year, an inch of water during the growing season, which for here is probably 8 months out of the year. You got to have an inch of water a week, whether it's falling out of the sky or coming out of the sprinkler or the hose. You've got to. That slowly applied water is very important. It keeps the grass healthy. The infrequent waterings, the purpose of those, as opposed to watering 5 minutes every day or whatever, is to make those roots chase that water down. It creates a stronger plant. Instead of the plant knowing that it's going to get water every day, the root system can stay there just below the surface. It knows it's going to get water. There's no reason to send those roots down to chase that water. So it just creates a stronger plant that can resist drought and everything better. So you do want to be mindful of that. Again, if I was using a hose and a sprinkler, you would be talking about 2-hour waterings per week. I will say that when you're using a hose and a sprinkler, before I had an irrigation system, I would put that hose and sprinkler out in that one spot. And granted, my soil wasn't too compact. If you have really compact soil, if you just throw it out there for 4 hours at one time, a lot of that water is going to run off. But I would water one time in each spot. I would water 4 hours each spot around my yard, and the yard stayed in really good shape. Obviously that's probably in July and August. That grass goes 5 or 6 days without any water at all. By the end of it, it's probably going to be a little bit stressed. So the 2 half-inch waterings are a better idea, but if it's out of complete necessity, just make sure you're getting that inch of water per week on there. So we'll move on to some of the summer pests here. I'm going to talk specifically about sod webworms here, but if you do water like I'm saying to do, that keeps the chinch bugs away. And that's probably the biggest killer of St. Augustine in our part of the world is chinch bugs. They're looking for drought stressed grass, and they can wipe a yard out within a few days once they move in. So if you're watering correctly, you've got good lush green grass, they move on to the next one. So staying on top of that water is important. On the flip side of that coin, there are sod webworms, and I'm not sure. Usually, it has a lot to do the sod webworm issue. How big of an issue it is each summer kind of depends on how severe of a winter we had. They overwinter in the thatch layer of your grass, so if it gets cold enough, it kills a lot of them, and they don't show up in near the numbers. But if we don't have much of a winter, they survive and come out in great numbers in the summer. And they, unlike chinch bugs, are looking for the healthiest grass that they can find. So you buy grass from us that is really souped up on nitrogen and lush and thick and green. That is a perfect home for sod webworms. So you really have to be vigilant and looking out for those. The early warning signs and the most visible thing that you see are if you go out in the morning and you walk through your grass while it's still cool outside, if you see the little brown moths in pretty good numbers flying up out of the grass, those are the moths that lay the eggs, that then the eggs hatch and the little larvae, little worms come out, and that is what actually eats your grass. So the moths are the first stage, first sign that you've got them, and it's time to start spraying. If you do, we like a liquid pesticide. We sell sayonara. We like the liquids because they are contact killers. You spray that out there in the hose, on the little thing that screws, the bottle screws on the end of your hose. You spray that out there, and it does a really good job. Now, I mentioned there being life cycles. There's the moths, the eggs, and the larvae. That stuff doesn't kill eggs. You probably need to. It's probably going to take at least 2 or 3 sprayings to get rid of those. I will say another sign that once the damage starts to show up, what you are looking for is these worms come out at night, and generally only at night. They come up out of their little hole and they eat a patch. They eat a little circle, and I'm not sure how many it takes, but usually it can be like softball, basketball size circle around their hole, and they take that material back down in it, I believe is what they do. And it kind of looks like somebody took a weed eater and just kind of touched it down, because they eat the tops of the leaves that they eat off will be real jagged. It's not a good clean cut like a mower might do. You can kind of pick that up. But I tell you, when you get them in there in great numbers, they can mow off your whole yard in a night or two. So if you're not paying attention, you go out there and they'll eat it down flat. There's no coming back from it. These things, yes, they stress the grass because they eat so much of the leaf material off. But if it's not in a lot of shade, it's in a fairly sunny area, and you get out there, you hit it with some water pretty quickly thereafter and kind of rejuvenate it, the grass will come back. However, when these things move in shadier areas, they eat off all that leaf tissue, and now there's nothing left to really gather the sunlight, and so you already got the cards are already stacked against you because you're in the shade, and that grass a lot of times will die. You've got to be careful about that, especially when you plant, if you're planting some palmetto or another shade tolerant type of grass in the summertime. I would say starting probably May on, you just have to be vigilant because our grass is very healthy. That is what those things are looking for, and so you do have to stay vigilant. If it's a sod webworm kind of year, sometimes they're a non-issue. We don't hear from hardly anybody about little brown moths or anything like that, so be mindful of that. It can change year to year. Next thing I want to talk about here is our critical window coming up to put out your summer pre-emergent, the Barricade Pre-emergent. We are obviously very start of May here. The next couple of weeks you really want to get that stuff out before the summer weeds start to germinate, and when we get those longer, warmer days is really when those summer seeds start to germinate. So you want to get out that Barricade Pre-emergent in May, our schedule says, but ideally the first 2 or 3 weeks of May before we really get hot, because we all know that heat is coming, and you want to get that stuff out there so it has a chance to do some good, because once June gets here, it's too late. You're not stopping any weed seed. Those weed seeds, if they're there, they've germinated and they're on their way. The way that stuff works is the pre-emergent keeps the weed seeds from ever emerging, hence the pre-emergent. What it does is it creates a barrier over the soil, and when those weed seeds hit the dirt and the sun hits them, water hits them, it doesn't ever let them take off and root down in that soil. It does a good job. It's not a silver bullet, and it doesn't stop all weeds, but it does keep a lot of them out. The other thing that we need to be doing and thinking about in May is getting down your super turf, the 19410 fertilizer. That's the silver bag. It's got the slow release nitrogen in it, and the purpose of that is, I believe there's a large percentage of the fertilizer is got the instantly available nitrogen, like the Imperial, the red bag, so you get that quick green up, but you also, I want to say like half of it is coated, and it takes a while to break down, hence the slow release nitrogen. That way it gets a slow application of nitrogen throughout the summer when our yards are most susceptible to fertilizer burn. What we don't want is everybody out there, we don't want you dumping on Imperial or something with the instantly available nitrogen when it's 100 degrees outside in July, and then not watering it quite enough up front. You burn your yard up in a real big hurry with that. So that's the purpose of this super turf. It's to put out in May, and it'll get you all the way through summer into the fall when you put out the fall specials. So super turf is what you need to be doing right now. At this point, it's really a March thing, late February, March, some of April. You can put down the weed and feed, but we get to May, it's probably time to, and also people will ask us too, you only do that once a year. No matter what kind of results you got from your application of a weed and feed, you don't want to do it more than once. Those herbicides are best, they're strong. It's best to do that one time. If you didn't get the kill that you wanted, you still got some weeds, chances are pretty good that it's probably a weed that's the active ingredients in it don't kill. So once a year max on the weed and feeds. Let's see, I guess we'll also talk about Palmetto St. Augustine a little bit here. We do have a fair amount of Palmetto still in inventory at our farm. Usually for the last several years, by this time we've usually run out of it, so it's not been an issue, but it looks like we're going to carry Palmetto well into the summer. So when you plant Palmetto in the summertime is fine. May is fine. We get into June, July, August, gray leaf spot becomes an issue. And we try to preempt just about every sale of Palmetto St. Augustine with, by the way, this is the season for gray leaf spot. Gray leaf spot is a fungus that all grass gets, but when you plant grass in the shade, which is what Palmetto was designed to do, when you plant it in the shade, it is more susceptible to it. And left unchecked, I suppose, it can kill it. We do put an application of fungicide out on a regular basis on all the grasses. Did they just put the stuff out last week, or did they put it out 3 weeks ago or whatever? So I don't know when it's going to run out. So we do suggest always, if you're planting grass in the shade, especially the Palmetto, putting on an application of the Heritage G fungicide to keep that at bay, because what gray leaf spot is, it shows up when you've got a lot of nitrogen in the grass, which ours does from our farm because we fertilize a lot. It's what makes our grass so healthy and green. And then you have to put all that excessive moisture on there, so you've got no choice but to put the excessive moisture in there. And then you throw in the shade, and it can be a tough combination. So using some Heritage G is an absolute must when you're planting grass in the shade over the summertime. So we do have the Palmetto right now. Like I said, last several years we've been out of it by May, but we've got it now. We have just about run out of cobalt. I think there's only a few pallets left of that. We are growing our inventory of that. They're expanding their acres of that, so next year we ought to have more cobalt hopefully available to us. Gray leaf spot, I didn't mention kind of what it looks like. It starts off, you see the individual blades of St. Augustine, and you'll see a little brown dot or two. It'll be smaller than a pencil eraser on there is what it starts out as, and then left unchecked, it spreads to the whole blade of grass. The whole blade of grass turns brown and disappears. So that's what you're looking for as gray leaf spot goes. The Heritage G is a good one to keep on hand if the gray leaf spot does show up. It also can be used to treat the brown patch in the fall. all of these things that we sell, these granulars, can be rolled back down tight and set up on a shelf in the garage and will be fine as long as they stay dry to use a later date. So I'm not sure what kind of expiration these things have, but I certainly know that you could use them the next year for sure. The quality difference, I had a friend say they saw some palmetto at one of the big box stores the other day, and he just said it did not look great. I mention this all the time in our videos and blog posts. Grass is all we do. I don't have 100,000 other items to sell to make money around here. Grass is the only thing we do. So if I'm not selling grass on a daily basis and turning it over, something has gone terribly wrong. So we have fresh grass. I can't tell you how many phone calls a day we get. Do you have fresh grass? It'll be one of the first questions or two. Yes, I have fresh grass pretty much daily, certainly in the springtime. We get a load of grass almost every single day until we get to the dog days of summer. It might slow down enough that we don't, but our grass is always fresh. Frankly, it always beats the pants off of our competitors because, again, it is always fresh. Our farm spends way more money per acre than most in their grass as far as fertilizers, herbicides, fungicides. It's why it's the cleanest and greenest, and I'll put our grass lay it down next to anybody's all day long and be very, very confident in doing that. If you check the prices, you also find out from the big box stores we're also a fraction of the price. Our quality is number one. Mowing. We do need to start thinking about raising mowing height. When we get to these hot days, you probably want to up those mowing heights 3.5 to 4 inches. In the shade, you may want to even do a ½ inch to an inch taller. The more leaf tissue that is exposed to that sun, the better it can do its photosynthesis, and it can stand a little bit better chance of survival when you get that grass in those shadier areas. I guess I want to close with here just kind of a summary here. Get your pre-emergent out, get your fertilizer out fairly quickly, monitor for the sod webworms, start that, keep that throughout the summer, monitor for fungus. I think that is kind of all I have here today. We'll be back next month. We'll be going into June, and we'll be really going into the oven, no doubt, and probably talking about chinch bugs some more and keeping an eye out for that drought stress to keep those chinch bugs at bay. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next month.